Welcome to Real Health with me, Carl Henry. Folks, today on the Real Health podcast, we are joined by John O'Driscoll, Managing Director of Blueprint Financial Planning and founder of financialfitness.ie. John specialises in helping people reduce money stress and build long-term financial confidence through personalised, non-product-led planning. In this ep, we're going to chat all things financial health and mental well-being, common mistakes people make with pensions and protection, why women are often underserved financially, and simple steps that listeners can take today to feel more in control of their money and their future. It's been a really tough time over the course of the last couple of months. We're all worried about the winter ahead already in terms of money. So we thought a money episode and budgeting episode is really important for our listeners. And John, welcome to the studio. How are you, dude?
Thanks a million, Carl. Great to be here.
It is an uncertain time for people, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. There's no two ways about it. There's a lot of geopolitical things happening. There's rising energy costs. It's in the paper on a daily basis about the cost of living pressures that people are under. So it's certainly a time where people are looking for a bit of advice and a bit of a steer. And hopefully today we can give some tips that people might be able to avail of.
And like financial fitness as part of overall health. We chat health all day long, both on a personal level, on the podcast. Health is crucial. Mm-hmm. Stress and health are absolutely linked, and money and stress are linked. So it's all part of the 100%. Same jigsaw.
100%. I think that there's kind of 4 pillars of people's health. There's physical, mental, financial and nutritional, and I think they're all intertwined. The problem with financial health or health issues is like they don't leave you. You go to bed at night if you're stressed about money. You wake up in the morning stressed about money. So you can't really just kind of box it off and compartmentalise, because there has been several kind of workplace studies done about the impacts of financial stress on people's lives. So I think that if there are 4 pillars of your life and if one of them is off, it's going to have a knock-on effect. Obviously, your area of expertise is in the whole area of physical health and nutrition and personal training and whatnot. And I think that, if you have a financial health issue, it can affect your overall well-being. So we try and focus on your wealth health, and basically trying to build a robust plan that will get you through all seasons, good and bad, and try and put structure in your finances that you are feeling empowered, that you're making good decisions, that you're set up for the future. And look, we all know money isn't everything, it's far from it, and literally your health is your wealth. But what money does is gives you choices, and what lack of money does is it takes away choices and gives you stresses. So what we try and do is eliminate your worries, eliminate your stresses, and make you feel more empowered to make better decisions going forward.
Are we getting better at talking about money?
You can notice now the referrals that are coming through are nearly younger people, and they're like, oh, my friend dealt with you, or, oh, I saw this reel on Instagram, or I saw this thing on social media. So social media has obviously played a huge part. But I think it's the fact that, the younger generation, maybe they saw their parents struggle with money, mm-hmm. and they don't want to replicate that. Or, they're working in industries where they're getting more, money mentor clinics in the workplace, or there's more of a HR program around financial literacy, which is really important. Yeah. But I think that a lot of people leave school and the level of financial literacy can be quite low. And
it is low in schools, isn't it? It's a good point,
I think so, because look, when you're in school, you do business studies or economics or accountancy or whatever. But, then when you go into college and you start off into work and then you get your first paycheck and you're like, so I've got tax and USC and PRSI, and next thing I'm paying a pension. What's this about? And there's often it's a big change for people, but there's no. So what I really try and focus on is financial literacy, your financial fitness, to try and make you financially fitter. And I think that you work to earn a living to sustain a lifestyle. So it's important that you understand what's coming in, what's going out. And I think that more people are definitely, AI could also be a big thing for this, because people go onto ChatGPT and go, or onto other AI tool and go, how do I make most of my money, or how do I earn a passive income? So there is a more of an appetite for people to get more, I think, in tune with their finances, for sure.
Okay, people listening in want to improve their financial fitness. They're starting from scratch. Let's talk through the process of what do you do?
The most basic step you can always do is have a budget. If you don't know what's coming in and what's going out, that's where the problems are going to start. Similar to if you want to try and lose weight, and they say, track your calories. If you're sitting down every day and you're not tracking your calories, and then you're wondering why you're not losing weight, it's a similar situation with finances. If you're just spending, tap, 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 and then at the end of the month you're like, Jesus, I have no money left. Where did it all go? So a budget's really important. Then, just small things like make sure that you're doing a tax return, getting any tax back, medical expenses.
People still leave a lot of tax that they're due.
There's crazy stuff.
And it's not just, you're not just due for year one, you're due, there's back tax on it 4 years. Yeah, it's unbelievable.
And a lot of people then, they don't claim medical expenses or, prescriptions, or, if your husband or wife are working reduced hours or working part-time or aren't working at all, you can reallocate your tax bands. So the revenue usually release stats every year, but there can be several million in unclaimed tax reliefs on a yearly basis. So that's really important to do that.
And chat to me around medical expenses, because we all have medical expenses at some, from a very basic level, from a GP visit up through prescription, whatever. Chat us through some of the things people can claim.
So, I suppose, doctor visit, physios, anything that's medically related, really.
And actually, on that, I'm going to plug for PTs here, because I came across it the other day, that if you're referred from your GP for exercise, rehab, strengthening, aging health work, if your GP refers you to a personal trainer, you're then entitled to 20% of that rebated off your tax.
You get 20% back on your tax.
Yeah.
I think a lot of things, Carl, is their inertia. It's too much hassle, or I don't have an accountant, so I can't do it myself. Or
it's a good point. So I have a bookkeeper who does all of that. I just send her anything that comes in. I send her an email with there's a receipt, there's the whatever. I don't even think about it.
Yeah.
And she charges me a fee, but it's worth every penny, because I wouldn't even know what website to go on.
Yeah.
So you can do it yourself, presumably, or you can get a bookkeeper.
Revenue Online and set up your own, on Ross and do it yourself, and or you can. There's online services available as well where people can do tax returns for you, or go to local bookkeeper or local accountant, or I'm sure someone will know someone who's an accountant or bookkeeper that can do something for you.
But the key thing is keep a box of all your medical, anything you spend on the medical, on yourself, on your family. Keep it all in a box. At the end of the year, that needs to be claimed back, or 20% of it is claimed back, whether you do it or someone else does it. Just keep the receipts and keep the proof.
See, I think a lot of the problem, not problem, but the issues are, people who are PAYE technically usually don't have accountants. If you're self-employed, you obviously have to have an accountant.
Yep.
But you just think that, look, I get my pay packet, I pay pension through my employer, but that's the tax relief is given at source, or I have my income protection through my employer, whatever it is. So people just feel that because they might have, or I've only got a couple €100 in expenses, it's no big deal. But over 4 years, it can be substantial. Yeah. That's another good thing to do in terms of improving your financial fitness. Pay yourself first.
Talk to me about that.
So Warren Buffett probably be one of my heroes, one of the most soundest minds in financial literacy and financial investing over the years. He always had coined the phrase about pay yourself first. So basically, when your pay packet comes in, allocate a certain percentage straight away to savings. So his mantra is that you should spend what you've left after saving, not save what you've left after spending. So, money...
How much should we be saving then?
Look, it all depends on the household. Everyone's different. Everyone has got kind of their own kind of personal inflation rate. So, people talk about inflation as 2 or 3%. But your neighbour could be on 7 foreign holidays a year. They could have an inflation rate of 40%, and you could be haven't gone on a holiday in 3 years. So your inflation rate's different. So it all depends on your, you cut your cloth, your measure. But if you can try and save 10% of your salary, for example, just picking an arbitrary figure. But what that does is, so we'll just say round figures, you get €2,000 net. You've 200 go into savings. You've €1,800 left over. Then at least you know that you have got some money gone into savings, so that gives you kind of a buffer. Mm-hmm. I like with my clients that they've kind of maybe 3 separate accounts, one for bills, one for spending, and one for savings.
Okay.
So it's all about kind of structuring your finances, because I think if people are using the one pot the whole time to pay for everything, it's very hard to kind of get structure in your finances. So that's another kind of a tip.
What about couples now? You're married, newly married. That always brings up the money conversation.
Yeah.
What's the way to go? Or is there Is there a best practice way to handle that?
Well, a lot of the married couples that I've met like recently, everyone's got a joint account for the mortgage, but they always have their own personal accounts as well. Definitely the likes of the online apps like Revolut or N26 or Raisin or whatnot, these are gone very popular because people can set up joint savings vaults and they can have their spare change going in and being rounded up and whatnot, and it's just an easy way of checking on the app. Maybe too easy sometimes because you're like, why did you draw 50 quid there from the savings the other day?
It's a tricky space
It can be, because obviously money is an emotive subject. In a couple, it's very rare that both people will be really clued into their finances. There's always kind of one is a bit of an ostrich, head in the sand, and one is really kind of good at it. So sometimes the conversations can be a bit delicate, but and a lot of people joke about that they've got their running away fund and all this kind of stuff. But
I suppose that's where it's handy to bring in an intermediary. Like a financial advisor, isn't it? If there is, because it's an awkward conversation to have as a couple, that at least you have someone in the room who can ask the questions.
And look,
like a financial therapist.
If you've got a standard of living based on 2 salaries coming in, it's very hard to develop a financial plan if one party is not partaking. If one person says, "Oh no, finances, forget about it, no interest," and the other person really into it, it's very hard to build a financial plan with that kind of a viewpoint. So what you just try and do is, look, everyone will have some kind of a, goal and objective, or they'll have some kind of, desired purchase or whatnot. So everyone talks about the rainy day, the God forbid fund if something happens. But what we try and kind of phrase as well is called the sunny day fund. So basically, what do you want to do rather than the, oh my God, if that happens, we're in big trouble. It's like, what do you want to do? Oh, we want to go on a cruise. We want to go on a big holiday. We want to build on an extension. We want to be able to put our kids through, 3rd level or send them to boarding school, whatever it is. So everyone will have some kind of a pressure point that will be a motivator for them. So if you can try and find the common theme of, look, as a couple, if you could make one wish, what would that be? And they say, oh, look, we'd love to move or upgrade our house or go to Australia or whatever it might be. And then if you can kind of find a common goal that they have, then the conversation on finances can get better.
You mentioned savings there and the importance of it. What do you do with the money in savings?
The biggest threat to your savings is inflation, which is basically the cost of living going up over time. I actually did a call the other night with a couple, and their son, he's 12, just going into first year, and he just said to me, "What's inflation?" And they had a packet of biscuits on the table, and I said, "Those biscuits, I think, were 79 cents last year in SuperValue. They're 2.09 today." I said, "That's inflation." I said, "That is just something as, arbitrary as a packet of biscuits has gone up nearly 3-fold in the space of 12 months.
We've switched our food shop.
Yeah.
Because we came back from the Camino trip and we were out of vouchers. So weren't not naming any one store in particular, but we had no vouchers to claim back. So we were like, "Feck it, we'll try somewhere else."
Yeah.
The difference in our food shop spend is it's about 30% down.
Wow.
Without any noticeable shift in. We're definitely buying slightly less.
Yeah.
I think we seem to be, but not by much now.
Yeah.
But the spend is dramatically down.
Yeah. And going back to everyone's got a pain or a pressure point. So, people are usually motivated by two main feelings of either fear or greed. So sometimes it's like, Jesus, there's a fear of this cost of living is going up the whole time. So, there has to be if your savings aren't beating inflation, it means the purchasing power is going down the whole time.
Okay, so your savings rate should be whatever when the government comes on the radio or whoever comes on the radio is talking about, inflation's at 2% or 1%.
If inflation's at 2% or 2.5% or 3%, which it has been for quite a while, and your money is earning less than 1% on deposit, and there's this old thing sometimes with people you talk to them, go, my money is, it's safe in inverted commas in the banks, and sure I can see it, but it's there, but the purchasing power of it is being depleted the whole time.
For the first time in my adult life, that actually makes sense now. I get the inflation versus your rate of savings thing. I get that makes total sense now. So your savings rate or whatever that number is on the savings should be higher than the inflation rate.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
And
what does one do then? If one has money in the bank and savings in the bank and says, okay, I'm going to get ahead of inflation, you invest it through
I would be a big believer in, you always have to have a short-term, ready, accessible, something happens, new engine in the car, washing machine blows up, or whatever incidentals life brings, you have to have accessible cash. But for longer term, 5 years plus, 10 years plus, your money has to be in a vehicle that has an opportunity to grow, to beat inflation, to compound at a rate that will give you a good return on your money. There's a plethora of things you can do in terms of savings plans or investments or whatnot, but the most important thing around that is that you have to sit down with someone, you have to get a feel for what your attitude to risk is and what your aptitude for risk is. Because a lot of people say, oh yeah, I want to invest. That goes back to the whole greed thing. I want to invest, I want to beat inflation, I want to do this. And then they fill out a risk profile questionnaire and they're the most risk averse person of all time.
What would be a good return on your money?
See, it's
probably a hard question.
It's hard to say, because again, it goes back to some people will be happy with just beating inflation, so they'd be happy with if I got 3.1% and inflation 3%, I'm happy. And then again, going back to the whole fear and greed, some people be like, oh, if I'm going to take the risk of going to the investment markets, I want at least 10% return, which every year is just impossible. But time is your biggest friend when it comes to investments. It's a really old adage that's constantly mentioned, but it's true. It's time in the markets, not timing the markets. Time is your biggest friend, because there's so many things happen on a daily basis. You couldn't even comprehend how many things happen on a daily basis that could affect an investment market, be it geopolitically or environmentally or whatever it might be. So time invested in the markets, and use a compound interest, the 8 wonder of the world, and let your money grow and compound over time. And you will definitely, if you give it time and diversification, you'll have a very good chance of getting a good return on your money.
What are the common mistakes people make when it comes to financial fitness?
Definitely not having savings, being spending too much, having no slush fund, not starting a pension early enough, leaving it until their 40s or 50s. It's never too late, but all the stats will show, all the research will show, the earlier you start a pension, the more money you'll have in the pot at the end. That's irrefutable. Not having enough protection in place. One of the hardest parts of our job as a financial planner is dealing with people who are making claims on serious illness cover, income protection. I've had 3 clients in the last 18 months make claims on serious illness cover, ranging from 41 to 49, all non-smokers, all healthy, all with what you would say would not be your archetypal candidate for a claim on a serious illness. And working through those claims can be tough, because obviously the person's after getting, very serious news. They're after being diagnosed with cancer or heart issue or another very serious illness, and that is definitely a hard part of the job. But at least if someone has cover in place and there's a lump sum that's paid out tax-free, can make a big difference to the family, because often health issues can become financial issues very quickly. Definitely, I think not talking about your finances with your partner in an open and frank way, and you just have to do it. You're both working hard, you have kids, you have there's something that you want to achieve, you want to not be stressing about money, and it's sitting down and having a chat for a half an hour over what will we do, will we put some money here, put some money there, and just having a bit of foresight and a bit of planning can make a huge difference. And I think you need to have some kind of a budget. I know it's a bit boring and it's a bit financial 101, but whether it's an Excel spreadsheet or literally write it out on a bit of paper, you have to know what your main outgoings are per month, and you have to try and get on top of it. And then look, I suppose like anything, shop around. People they get their health insurance renewal through, they get their home insurance renewal through, they get their car insurance renewal through. And like, don't get me wrong, like, it can be a pain in the backside to go ringing around and ringing different people, but like, you know, something that could be worth it. You could save a couple of £100 a year,
which is huge
on premium. And I mean, if you save £300 a year and you're a top rate taxpayer, like, you've got to earn over £600 to get £300 into your pocket, which is not an insignificant amount of money. So, just try and identify leakage. We all have leakage in our finances. Like, no matter how good people are, there are, like, you know, ways where you kind of look, go like, geez, I'm spending X amount on that. Or
key takeaways from the episode for people listening in: have the chat.
Have the chat for sure. Make out a list of goals or desire that you'd like to achieve, because it's important to have, you know, some kind of incentivization to do and put structure in your finances. Identify leakage in your accounts. Don't just assume that you're being very, very, you know, thrifty with your spending. Shop around for your insurances. You know, that's what brokers are there for. Definitely, I think, have a couple of different pots of money: bills account, day-to-day spending, savings. Definitely automate a part of your money into savings. And if you're not paying into a pension, I know now it's changed with the whole My Future Fund and auto-enrollment, and that was one of the reasons behind it. It's because Ireland does have a big pensions problem coming down the line. But, you know, definitely they're tax efficient. You get tax relief on your contributions. You have the opportunity to give yourself a fund in retirement that you can use to substantiate your living. People are living longer now, thank God. Like, you know, if you look at the CSO figures, you know, 86, 87 for a woman, I think, 83 for a man. Someone retires at 60.
That's a big jump. Like, that's jumped by 5 or 6 years over the course of like the 90s and the 80s. Like, it's a big jump.
Someone's retiring at 60, 65. They've potentially, you know, 18 to 25 years in retirement. You know, the contributory pension, state pension in Ireland is just under 15 grand. If that's going to be your sole income in retirement, people will think, oh, that'll sustain me, because again, going back to, like, you know, I won't have much to spend on, and my kids will be gone and whatnot. But like, what does 15 grand buy now? What will 15 grand buy in 15 years time, 20 years time, with inflation going up? So that's why you have to try and take a long-term view on things. And I think the most important thing really is engage, talk. Like, financial advisors are very well qualified. We have to adhere to very strict compliance and codes of conduct, and you know, at the end of the day, our job is to help you put manners and put a bit of structure in your finances. And it's a very rewarding job. And when you see people being able to retire early, or sell their business, or, you know, put their kids through college and, you know, achieve the goal that they want to achieve, that's a very cool byproduct of our job.
Sold to one and all. Well done, dude. If people want to contact you to book in for a chat.
So Blueprint Financial Planning is the name of my business. So it's blueprintfp.ie is the website. Then I have another website, financialfitness.ie, which is really for online consultations. And then Instagram is blueprint_financial_planning. And that's where you'll find me.
Cool. Well, listen, we'll tag you on all the kind of content around the episode. Thank you for coming in, all the way from Skib in West Cork, and myself and Clonakilty is the West Cork crew. Folks, I hope you really enjoyed today's episode of Real Health with me, Carl Henry. As ever, you know where we are, at Carl Henry PT on Instagram, realhealth@independent.ie, and on the Irish Independent website. Get your budget done, write it all down, see what is coming in and see what's going out, and have an absolutely fabulous week. And we'll see you next week for more Real Health. Slán go fóill.